Have you ever felt completely alone in your grief? Like no one truly understands the weight you carry? The loneliness of child loss is real and can be very overwhelming. Throw in disappointment from lack of support from people whom you thought would be there for you, and the feeling that no one understands grows even deeper. I have a question for you today. Do you understand the potential that community can have in your life? Or maybe we should frame it like this. Do you understand the potential outcomes for the lack of community in your life? I have some news that I'm anxious to share with you today. But first, we are going to talk about how to lessen the effects of loneliness and the grief of child loss, with some pretty incredible statistics that you need to hear, friend. So stick with me until the end, because I'm going to share a way that you can make a difference in the community of child loss. If you're grieving the death of your child and you want the steps that lead to believing with confidence that life is still worth living, then you're in the right place. Hello, I'm Teresa, a grief mentor. That's been where you are, and I teach grieving moms like you how to navigate life after child loss. If you're ready to take a step of courage and build a solid foundation to live with hope and purpose, then I'm here to teach you how. Are you ready for what God has for you? Then I'm ready to teach you. We live in a me world. The perspective in our society is, what you going to do for me? Try to make eye contact when you're out and about and notice how many times people's eyes dart to the ground for fear that you're going to ask something of them. This perspective has taken the community out of our lives, and it's happened slowly, one generation at a time. We were not meant to live that way. What happened to us, friends? I'm old enough to remember what community to a farmer really meant. Now, if you're young and you're listening to this, you may not have the perspective to understand what I'm talking about because you may not have ever seen it in your lifetime. My dad's dream was to be a full-time farmer. This is definitely where I got my work ethic from. He was a welder for the railroad, and he had a dream of living off of the land. He was motivated to do this because he and his brothers knew what it was like to go hungry. He and my mother went through the Great Depression. Mom was a food hoarder. She lived her entire life from the place of food scarcity, which not only affected her life because she died early in her 70s from diabetes and heart disease, but it affected my life and the life of my siblings because everything in our home focused on having enough food. That's why we raised cows and pigs and chickens, and we planted 4 gardens that provided enough food to last for an entire year. That resulted in a life of work. There were no Saturday cartoons for us. In fact, I watched the very first Disney movie that I had ever seen when I was 18 years old. But the value of hard work that was instilled in me built a foundation that has supported me in my adult life, knowing and understanding the value of hard work. We were tobacco farmers as well, as were many farmers back then. Please don't judge me. I had no control over that. However, I did have to work in the tobacco fields, just like everyone else in my family. Even though I was a little girl, we all had jobs. In regards to community, if one of my dad's farmer friends needed help getting his crops in, we were right there helping them. If we needed help getting our crops in, my dad's farmer friends were right there helping us. Community back then was a lifeline. In fact, I never ate food out of a can unless it was served to me at school my entire youth. I continued that lifestyle as an adult until my nursing career and birthing children became so demanding I couldn't manage it all. And we are seeing a trend back to that way of life. The farm-to-table movement, the term homesteader, is a trendy term now for people who are attempting to live off the land. I think that, in fact, is a good thing because we do need to get away as a society from living on processed food and appreciate what it takes to grow our food. A lot of our children and grandchildren are so far removed where a potato comes from. They may not even realize it's grown in the ground and it has to be harvested. The community in my youth was everything. And our house burned when I was 18 years old to the ground because the nearest fire hydrant was a mile away. And the community built our house back, friend. My dad paid for the supplies, but he never paid a dime for labor. Times are much different now, and it has cost us as human beings. I'm going to share some statistics with you now. Studies show that loneliness can be as damaging to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Think about that, friend. People with strong social connections have a 50% higher chance of living longer than those without meaningful relationships, so says Harvard study of adult development. Tony and I are in the phase of life where we are considering all of our options in regards to retirement. He's 5.5 years older than me, and that makes a difference as we get older. During my research of when is the best time to start your retirement, I have found numerous statistics that support the earlier you retire with robust community in your life adds not only years, but quality that supports meaningful living. Individuals with strong social support are significantly less likely to experience depression and anxiety compared to those who feel isolated, according to the American Psychological Association. 69% of grieving individuals say that their faith or spiritual community has helped them cope with their loss and improved their quality of life. Studies show that bereaved parents who engage in support groups report a 30% improvement in their emotional well-being compared to those who grieve alone, according to the National Alliance for Grieving Children. So let's break these statistics down a little bit for those of us who grieve and why community matters to us. Grief isolates, but community fosters healing. Now, take note, when I'm talking about community here, I'm talking about those early stages of grief where your community is your inner circle and your counselor or your grief mentor. That is your community. That is your safe place. That's one reason why in the Grief Roadmap, we start right out of the gate learning what it takes to create those boundaries to be able to grieve in a healthy manner so that your grief does not manage you. Now, that is your safe place, and allowing yourself to be counseled or mentored during that time, the importance of that cannot be overstated, friend. And here's why. Left alone with irrational grief brain can be a dangerous place to exist. Notice, I didn't say live. So if you're ready to spend some one-on-one time with me so that you can get those answers to those really hard questions that you have, I am here and I am ready for the conversation. Visit thegriefmentor.com or my show notes to book that time together. So here's how embracing connection can bring light into your darkest moments, whether it's in that one-on-one group setting, in your early grief, or whether or not you have found a group setting that feels safe and comfortable to you. Now, it's important to point out that not all group settings are a safe place. I have been in a few, okay? So I want to share with you that the Grief Roadmap is a very safe place. In fact, I have students right now inside the Grief Roadmap who have told me the significant effect that being in this community setting has had on their life, even in the short time that we've been in this January class. Another safe group setting I feel is Grief Share. Now, Grief Share is not specific to child loss like the Grief Roadmap is. However, don't let that discourage you because we learn from all different types of grief when we're in that grief setting. But the only way to determine whether or not a group setting is safe for you is to make sure your non-negotiables are met, okay? And that's making sure you have the ability to be you and not feel judged, and you're not trying to meet someone else's expectations of you by being in this group setting. If you feel pressured to somehow perform or meet somebody's expectations of where you're supposed to be in your grief journey, that is not a safe place for you, friend. I would not recommend that you be there because We need that space to be us, a place where we feel safe and not judged. When we have a safe place like that, these are the benefits. Number one, emotional support, a safe place to share your pain without judgment. This piece cannot be overstated because, friend, before someone can be taught or learn anything, they must feel seen, understood, and believed. So that's a very important aspect that needs to be present in that group setting for you to be able to benefit from the community effects. Number two, validation of your grief. Others who can understand and affirm what you're feeling is real and valid. The comfort that comes from knowing that you are among friends, people who get it, who don't have these expectations that somehow you are not in your grief journey where you should be. No, that's what you want to avoid. But when you're in a community setting where you have that freedom to really express those hard feelings and hard questions, friend, that is a huge validation of your grief. And number three, shared healing. I can't say enough about this. Connecting with others allows for mutual encouragement and understanding, because this is what happens, guys, because this is what God created us to do, is to be in community. So when you are in a community right now inside the Grief Roadmap, we have people that have experienced losses in a range early as 6 months and all the way to me, I'm 6 years. So that range of grief allows for shared healing because it allows us to see that we're going to make it. And we can learn from each other. And it makes my heart happy when I hear my students talking about how something someone said helped them, and they might be just a little bit down the road further than they are. But being in that community makes them feel so seen and heard. It allows for that mutual encouragement. It's a beautiful thing, friend. Number four, reduced isolation. Being around others who get it helps break that cycle of loneliness, because we can isolate so easily in our grief because the fear of being in social situations that we can't handle, which is why I said it's so important to make sure you have your non-negotiables in those social situations. Being able to navigate back into society is so difficult. And so we tend to recluse, right? We tend to pull back and keep it to ourselves for fear of all the things, right? Fear of somebody saying something to us that we don't know how to respond to. All the things creates a situation to where we want to isolate. But community can take the sting out of that. And community being in those one-on-one settings too, because often that's the first place we need to start. Because when we can get in that one-on-one setting and we can talk to someone who has wisdom and knowledge to be able to coach us and help us and to see that what we're feeling is normal, it takes that burden off of us that somehow something is wrong with us, right? Number five, strength and encouragement. Seeing others healing and moving and taking those baby steps, even though there's baby steps, because here's the thing. One of the things that I do in my one-on-ones and in my group setting, I want you to see your wins. So I have some things in place that I use with the people that I coach to help them see their wins, because what happens so often, grief is like a slippery slope, right? You take one step and then you feel like you've gone back 3 or 4. So then you don't see progress. And when we don't see progress as human beings, we become really discouraged. And the weight of it then tends to compound because we don't see a way out of it. Right? It's just this heaviness that never seems to let up. But in that environment to where we can have somebody validate and show us that this is possible, friend, this is possible. And then we hold out our hand and we say, take my hand and let me help you show you the way. That is the power of community. Number 6, practical guidance. Learning from others about navigating those hard places on the calendar, the triggers, how to manage so many things that we have to learn to manage. Early in our grief journey, it's about survival, especially that first year. It's all about survival. And then in that second year, the reality starts to set in This is not going away. And friend, you need some tools. You need some tools to be able to navigate the next steps in that grief journey. That's why I'm here. That's why I provide these two different types of settings, the one-on-ones and the group setting, because we need those tools to be able to see a way forward so that we don't get stuck. And number 7, the spiritual support of community, finding faith-filled encouragement to remind you that even though you can't hear him or see him, God is still present in your grief. I am just as much of a spiritual mentor as I am a grief mentor, because God's word is what I have steeped myself in to be able to be where I am right now. You know, in the last episode, I shared with you guys how we had the interview for the While We're Waiting. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, you can go back. It's just one behind this one. And I included that link for you to be able to watch the video of the interview. So Tony and I knew our video was going to air that weekend. So we ended up staying for the AM service and the 11:30 service. And it was kind of surreal for me, friend, because early in my grief journey, I would sit through both services because grief brain is so real and things just bounce off, right? I don't care how many times you hear it, it doesn't soak in because our brains are so busy and chaotic processing all of the internal stuff. I would literally sit through both services and I would take notes. And it was amazing to me what God showed me differently through each of those sermons. It was the same message. Maybe the verbiage might be a little different here and there, but it was the same message that I was hearing. But what he wanted me to get, for the Holy Spirit was showing me, was something different each time. That's what spiritual support is all about, friend. That faith-filled encouragement, his words, is what brings life to us. It's what returns our life to us. Number 8, opportunities to serve. Giving back to others in grief can bring purpose beyond what you can begin to imagine, friend. And being in community does that, because we are all gifted differently. And when you bring a group of believers together that are in pain, we learn from each other, including me. I told the ladies in our last meeting last week, I said, I was crying because I am an emotional person and that's just who God made me to be. But I told them the gift for me is that I get to be in the front row seat of what God is doing in their lives. It's going to make me cry now because I see them serving each other. It's just a miraculous thing, guys, when you get in a community where that safety is there and you can really let down the walls and know that you're loved, you're supported, and you're prayed for, right? And number 9, accountability. This is an important one, friend. Staying engaged. That's hard to do when you're grieving. This last support group meeting that I had, the free group, one of the ladies showed up in her robe. And you know what? I admire her so much because she showed up, right? She didn't feel like showing up. She was having a bad day, but she knew she needed to engage in community with other believers to get the strength to be able to face tomorrow. And she messaged me afterwards and told me how beneficial it was, although she could hardly talk. Friend, community cannot be overstated. Number 10, connection with hope. Realizing that while your grief remains, it is possible for grief to walk alongside joy. Is it natural? Nope, it's not. But it's supernatural. And that's where the Holy Spirit comes in, friend. And if you're stuck, if you're feeling stuck in that loneliness of grief, you don't have to stay there. I know the pain feels overwhelming and the sadness over and over, grieving moms tell me. The sadness is so overwhelming. I know, friend. I know it. And if I could take it from you, if I could just wave a wand over you and remove it, oh, God knows that I would. But it doesn't work like that, right? See, here's the thing. I didn't choose this path. But I have chosen to embrace where I have been placed. God has given me a gift for which I cannot explain, and I won't understand it till I get there. He has allowed me to sit in front of grieving moms who need hope. Friend, I can't understand that. And sometimes I'm overwhelmed by it. But you know what? This is what he tells me. Teresa, you say yes. I'll take care of the rest. So if he's asking you to take that step, will you please say yes and let him take care of the rest? Because this is what he has called me to do. He's called me to help you because of the comfort that he has given me. He has called me to reach out to you to comfort you with that same comfort. We find that in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4. Now, before we close, I want to share some news with you. This is something that you can participate in if you choose to do so. I want to explain it to you. I want to be quick here. I don't want to take much of your time, but I want to let you know that Tony and I have had the privilege to participate in the very ground stages of a child loss documentary. It's called Surviving Child Loss and is produced by Todd and Melissa Schaefer. It's been in the works now for well over a year. It now has a website and the first 3 episodes that are going to be included in the documentary. Okay, so we haven't got to the documentary yet. He's building the documentary step at a time. It's the promotion phase. And the reason this is so important is because the funding will come or not based on whether or not there is enough interest to prove that a child loss documentary is needed. That's the way it works. Todd and Melissa have interviewed, I believe, 15 different couples. And eventually this is going to be made into a full-length documentary. But it's baby stages where we are right now. Okay, so the first 3 episodes are up. Mine and Tony is one of those. Jill and Brad Sullivan, one of the founders of the ministry, While We're Waiting, is one of those. And another couple, which I have interviewed on the podcast, is the Westcoffs. Todd and Melissa has interviewed all of us already. But those 3 episodes are in a somewhat final form. It's going to change before it actually ends up in the documentary. But just to let you know what you're supporting, the parents that have lost children that he interviewed, it covers accidents, cancer, illness, combat death, stillbirth, suicide, addiction, depression. It's a very thorough representation of what child loss looks like. So what I would like for you to do is watch the episodes that have been released on this website, because the more views that we get, the more likely the funders will commit. Now, just to give you an idea of what it takes to fund something like this, I gave Todd, I'm learning all of this stuff I never knew before. There's A-roll, there's B-roll or whatever. B-roll is like what kind of rolls in the background while someone's talking and telling their story. Todd had asked for whatever I had in regards to that to be able to enhance the B-roll. So I sent him all the links for the footage that I had saved for the media sources that covered Andrew's accident. To use this footage in the documentary, he was told that it would cost $125 per second. All in all, I probably sent him close to 5 minutes of media coverage from different outlets. $125 per second. So none of that is included right now. We don't have the funding for that. So we will have to wait until the funding starts, and he'll add in things as we go along. So what you view is on these 3 episodes is probably not going to be, well, I know it's not going to be the final product. He's already told us that. But it's the beginning stages so that we can make sure that there's enough interest that the funders will say, this is going to be worth our time. I would like for you to go to my show notes, hit that link, watch the episodes, and share it with your friends or anybody that you think that would benefit from it. The content is going to enrich your life. It's done very well. Todd is a producer and writer. He's been doing this most of his life. He and his precious wife lost a son to suicide, and his compassion and his interest in getting this thing off the ground, it has been a work. And you can imagine how difficult that is when you're also grieving. So this is definitely a passion project for Todd and Melissa. So friends, go to the show notes, hit that link, watch those episodes. And you know what? I would love to hear from you. Love to hear from you. If you will watch those episodes and email me a little note to let me know what helped you, if there was anything in there that really stood out to you, whether it's my interview or any of the other interviews, I would love to hear from you. So visit my show notes, get that link, and friend, if you want to spend some time with me, I'm here. And that's all I have for you today, friends. So until next time, take care